Welcome everyone, Guten Tag. My name is Adam and this is the German Startup Conference 2021 hosted by Startup Network Europe, which I'm the founder of. And guys, before we begin, I just want to say hello to everyone. I know most of you are founders and investors in Germany, but we also have many people from abroad, especially Silicon Valley. So before we begin, I just want to start this event by giving a summary of the German startup scene. So according to dealroom.co, there are at least 19,000 verified startups in Germany. And as you can see here, there has been a massive growth in only 10 or 11 years. The startups, the money invested in startups has multiplied and multiplied and multiplied year on year. So Germany has a very vibrant startup scene. And this is partly because Germany is a huge market. Germany, of course, has 83 million people. It's the center of the European Union, 445 million people, and it has a very innovative economy. Some say the most innovative economy in the world. NimbleFin said it was the #1 country for startups in Europe because of favorable regulations, a low corporate tax rate of nearly 16%, a highly educated workforce that's very multilingual, and a reputation for quality. There's many, many other factors, but it's very strong. In terms of Germany, there's also many unicorns. BioNTech is probably the most famous. It's certainly the most valuable. Infineon Technologies, Delivery Hero, Zalando, HelloFresh. These are all valued at billions and billions. And some of them were found very recently, only in the past few years. And our plan today, folks, is very simple. We have 800 people connected now, by the way. Our plan is to do a 2-hour event with 33 different speakers in just 2 hours. So it's very unique. And it's a mix of 2-minute discussions and 10-minute discussions as well. The introduction is, of course, being done by me. And we will have a Silicon Germany section, which has 3 parts. And these are typically German entrepreneurs in Germany. We will also have a Silicon Valley section, which is typically German entrepreneurs in the United States. And we will also have 3 fireside chats and 2 presentations. So very exciting agenda ahead in just 2 hours. And folks, I'm going to put this in chat in a moment, startupnetwork.eu/Germany. But for me, this is the most important part of the event for a few reasons. It lists all our sponsors, all our speakers, their LinkedIn profiles, their company websites, in case you want to get in contact with them. And also, I'm traveling to Germany on Thursday. I will be in Berlin on Thursday for a meetup, so hopefully some of us can meet. And also Munich next Tuesday, there will be another meetup. I'm going to post links to that too. But most importantly of all, we're going to do a Slack community. So this Slack community, I want to say, is probably the most ambitious thing that we've ever done. And it's because Startup Network Europe essentially started in April. I did an Irish Startup Conference 2021. We got 910 attendees, and most of these people were founders, they were investors, and the event was like this. It was 2 hours long, lots of speakers. It was very popular. So I quit my job and I did a Swedish Startup Conference, over 1,000 people, Dutch Startup Conference, over 1,000 people, last week a Swiss Startup Conference, over 1,000 people. And then today looks like our best event so far. We're 850 people now. So I love these events. I think they give a lot of value in just 2 hours. What happens after the events and how can we really help startups in Germany? How can we use this opportunity of having so many people connected? And when I did these events, it's clear that in every country, including Germany, there is a lack of a startup community. And because of this, startups lose business opportunities, they don't learn from each other, they make avoidable mistakes, and they don't know how to connect with investors, and they don't know about free government supports. So for example, I'm in Ireland and I will hire my first employee next month. And hopefully the Irish government will pay for half the salary for the first year of my first employee. It's something called a priming grant. And this is something that lots of startups in Ireland can take advantage of. But most startups don't know about it, so they never know this, they struggle, they never start their business in the first place. And I'm 100% sure the similar things happen in Berlin, in Bavaria, all over Germany as well, and in every country in Europe. So to transform the German startup ecosystem, let's make a community on Slack. It's going to be free to join, moderated, professional, with thousands of members. And in that group, we can share free content, free events, we can ask and answer questions, and we can help each other out. So I'm going to share that in a moment, but first, let's get on with the event. It is sponsored, by the way, by Fiverr, by Twilio, Personio. We're going to talk about them later. And our first section will be the Silicon Germany section, German entrepreneurs in Germany. And Nancy, you are our first speaker. It's very nice to have you today. And Nancy, our question for you is, what is your biggest learning from the COVID-19 pandemic and your top tip for moving forward? And Nancy is founder and general manager at Humanize and Nemes Ventures, which help businesses and end users to understand, learn and deploy AI technologies. Working with emerging tech since 1995, Nancy has held several senior leadership positions at Google, Microsoft and Avnet.
Thank you, Adam, for your great question and for this wonderful introduction. And thank you to the hundreds of people who joined this. This is a great event. I really love this format. I told you, Adam, so good to see some innovation right here in this space. Also, I'm honored to open up with your good question. And I think really my learning will still evolve because we are still in the middle of managing this pandemic. But for now, I would say the number one learning was that community is essential and that technology is also essential in the fight of the pandemic. So how wonderful that you come here today and talk about community, because that's really, and I didn't even know that you're going to position this event like this, but really it's about community and technology. In fact, in April 2020, exactly a year and a half ago, I wrote a blog post on Humanize that was titled, back then, at the start of the pandemic, I wanted to look forward. And my blog post was titled, My Top 10 Predictions for the Post-COVID-19 World and How Artificial Intelligence Can Address Them. And I would like to connect this to my learning today because number one on that list was called the Agile Workplace Transformation with co-creation at its core. So I was talking about agility in this workplace transformation and how important co-creation is. So the augmented workforce that we have seen improving already work and business results, and without taking away the human touch, despite the fact that we are now doing events like this online. I know we all crave to come back offline, but it's amazing to see how humans really can make the best use of technology. And to connect back to my world about artificial intelligence, I think humans will decide and need to continue to decide how to make artificial intelligence an opportunity, how to improve on its limitations. It does represent a massive opportunity for entrepreneurs because human developers as well as the workflows are fundamentally different in this era of machine learning. And we can see this whole new ecosystem of startups currently building fantastic products and tools. So it already is a very dynamic and exciting category, and it will grow significantly in the coming years. So my top tip, because you asked me the second part of your question, what's my top tip, is always to remember that talent is and will remain scarce. So it is a great opportunity for each one of us, as well as for universities and companies, for upskilling and reskilling. And I constantly seek to broaden up my own horizon in this high-tech area, adding new skills, adding new insights, experiences. And I can only recommend everyone look into the opportunities AI is providing because it will impact every aspect of our life and kind of hashtag lifelong learning. That's the new gold rush, in my opinion. And my top tip is let's make the best use of technology to enable humans.
Nancy, thank you very much. And during the event, I will be sharing polls, surveys. So it'll be great to get your insights and I will share the results of those polls. Next up, our next speaker, Franziska, founder and CEO of yoona.ai, a new global leader in digitizing design processes. Their main product is a scalable, artificial intelligence-based B2B software solution that shortens the fashion design process to a few clicks. And Franziska, our question for you is, why do you think the fashion industry needs to be revolutionized and how are startups helping to achieve this?
Thank you, Adam, for the invitation, and hello to everyone all over the world. I saw people from Brazil and California and from everywhere. Yeah, happy to be here. So how can I answer these questions? I would say the first sentence is the fashion industry is stuck in the 80s. It's all done manual, it's inefficient, and it has to change. So a lot of startups are attacking problems in this industry. The production is a beast, for example. I can talk about you now and about my experience. I was a designer for 10 years. I was working manually. I did designs with Photoshop. I was looking manually for inspirations. I did print designs, which I created, and it took ages, it took hours. If you have a look to companies like Marco Polo, they need over 55,000 hours per year to get their designs done. That means over 11 million euros. So if you have a look to Marco Polo, it's a smaller companies, and they do maybe like Ernst's family, they do 4,000 designs monthly. If you have a look to bigger companies like Adidas or even bigger, they do 30,000 designs monthly. So if they design all manually and printing everything and prototyping everything, so they even use over 4 million kilometers of fabric. How can that be? We are 2021. So we have to change that. What we are now doing with Yoona, we are using trend data, historical design data like technical drawings, prints. We are using also sales data of the companies, bigger companies and smaller companies. We're analyzing this data, and with neural networks, we're creating new design material just in seconds. That means once the neural network is trained, the design companies get their design material in seconds. 50,000 hours just to some simple clicks. So, and that I think is the new way to work in the fashion industry. We even can be more sustainable because we have to close this gap in between sustainability and economic goals. And I think the goal is, and what we have to do in the fashion industry is to use technology, which we do with Yoona.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And next up, we have Nina, CMO of Vivla Car, a car subscription service, which brings back the easiness to the automotive branch. Nina is also CEO of TaylorFlynn, which specializes in storytelling in any format and across all channels. And our question for you again is, what is your biggest learning from the COVID-19 pandemic and your top tip for moving forward?
Yeah, hi everybody. Really nice to meet you. Let me start with our startup, Vivla Car. When I think about most of the startups in my environment, COVID has changed how to move forward. And we are doing car subscription, which is a new model on the mobility market. And as terrible as it looks at the beginning of a pandemic on all levels, I think the most valuable learning for us is and was that you have to be very flexible and see where are the new market opportunities. And I think this is relevant for every startup. So on the one side, of course, customer centricity always to put first and to make sure that there's still relevance, or what is the relevance in the new situation of MIG. We have, for example, in the mobility industry, a sourcing problem because we have the sensor crisis. So it's difficult at the moment to get cars. At the same time, for dealers, just as an example from real life, from my life, if you have used cars and sell them between being 12 months and 24 months old, the depreciation is very little. So it does make more sense for them because at the moment during COVID, the used car prices are very stable to put their car for a while, 6 months, 12 months, onto the market in subscription and then sell them afterwards and to earn more money with this. And this is a new situation. This hasn't been that way before. So I think for all the startups out there who are joining us, the most important from my side is to look carefully what are opportunities and chances, how has the market changed through a pandemic, and how can you use this as an advantage to still scale and to adjust your business growth. And maybe one sentence regarding digital agency or our digital agency. For us, of course, it was crazy because the clients which we're working with are mainly tech clients, and the digital communication wasn't the biggest, most important thing. Fairs were really important and so on. So there was a huge shift in the industry to now make sure that you can sell your products online, that you have the right packages with a smart digital campaign through all formats and channels. And I think there the whole world learned how to be more digital. And there's tons of stuff to do, so it keeps us busy.
Thank you, Nina. Very, very good points. And next up, we have Tatiana, co-founder and managing director of HealthCaters, and a health engagement platform for companies and their employees focused on prevention of chronic illnesses. Prior to HealthCaters, Tatiana spent 2 years heading up the BizDev team at a health insurance startup based in Berlin, and over 5 years in venture capital and investment banking. And Tatiana, we currently have 1,000 people connected, so good luck.
Hey Adam, thanks for the introduction, and I'm really glad to be here. So my name is Tatyana, and I'd like to share with you the 3 learnings this pandemic taught me. So lesson number 1 is that even the strongest medical systems are extremely fragile. And let's just look at Germany as an example. With the emergency reallocation of staff towards patients who are sick with COVID, many of us who had less urgent issues, but nonetheless not less important ones, we were literally just locked out of the medical system for months long. And what we need to learn for the future is to find a way to access healthcare continuously without 100% reliance on the capacity of doctors or hospitals. And that's exactly what we do at HealthCaters. We offer a platform for self-conducted health screenings to companies and their employees for office and home use. The second biggest lesson is that, and I think this was mentioned by some of the founders before, this pandemic has taught us that being stuck in a status quo bias can be really dangerous. And if you've invested time and money and resources in something, but it's not relevant anymore, you really need to drop it and let it go fast and move forward. It could be really complicated. And as a founder that works in the B2B market, I can tell from my own experience that some companies around us are much bigger, much more established, much more stable, and they have the luxury to take this change slowly and at a comfortable pace. But as a startup founder, you just don't have that time, and you need to drop it, you need to refocus and move forward. And the last thing I wanted to share is a quote that I read right before the pandemic. Your success as an entrepreneur is defined by the number of options you create for yourself. And I think for me personally, this really helps me go through the pandemic with fundraising, with sales, with hiring. And to be frank, before the pandemic, we didn't even think if we would survive it. And now post-pandemic, we have 2 products that work. And one learning from this is that we've expanded our options continuously. We pursued them, and one of them eventually worked out. So my advice for all entrepreneurs to move forward is to be resilient, to adjust fast, and to expand your options. Thank you.
Tatiana, that was a lot. Thank you. A lot to say in a short time. And I'm going to share the results of the polls that we did. So 67% of you are in Germany, which is very good, very impressive to have great diversity. And in Germany, you are all over the country. Even Berlin only has 18% of people, so very, very interesting. And in terms of what types of startups are in this conference, no surprise, it's B2B, 70%. It was the same for our Dutch and Swiss events. And the company size, very similar to our Swiss event last week, 2 to 10 employees dominates, but we also have many people from large companies, and people are at very different stages. And I'll go on now to the second part of our Silicon Germany section, and this is focused on investment. And our next speaker will be Simon, CEO and director of qodeo, a web app that matches entrepreneurs and potential investors. qodeo is committed to connecting entrepreneurs of underserved communities with access to private capital. And our question for you is, when it comes to investment, what is one thing startups and scale-ups should know?
As they say in Germany, guten Nachmittag from London. Happy to be with you today. We're a London and New York based business, qodeo, and Adam said it beautifully. We are a platform that matches over 5,000 VC and PE firms with entrepreneurs around the world of all stages and sectors. And our aim is to get you funded as quickly as possible by sort of effectively shortlisting your potential matches with entrepreneurs, your matches with VC and PE firms around the world. In fact, we have, I think, 504 VC and PE firms in Germany, I just noted down today, and over 1,930 in the US. So what's the biggest question? Well, we found that there's a few questions, I'm afraid. Qodeo's research with INSEAD, the business school, showed that entrepreneurs waste thousands of euros and hours on trying to do the fundraising process instead of running their own businesses. And of course, what VC and investors want to see is your business. And the more time you spend trying to raise money, the less time you spend running a business. So the first lesson I'd say, I suppose, is try to shortlist who you should speak to. That's obviously what we help with. And as Adam's kindly said, that if you go to qodeo.com, you can get 50% off today using a coupon, GSC50, to get 50% off. We have a very low-cost platform that helps you shortlist, but there's a number of ways you can do this. You must, first of all, work out who you need to speak to, who you are, and who you need to speak to. There's no point to being the wrong people or even the right people at the wrong time. And we use a lot of sort of dating analogies. So it's like dating preferences. You know whether you're straight or gay, you know whether you're single or not, you know whether you like certain kind of proclivities or not. And similarly, raising money is just the same. You've got to find a funding match. And your match at that time, you know, it's the analogy, if your potential date is in a relationship at the time and not looking for a relationship, is the wrong person to speak to at that time. Same thing with VCs. If the VCs funds are tied up, don't go after them. So you need to, the number one thing I'd say is look at focusing your fundraising activities on who you should speak to, create a shortlist, and then find out how to speak to them and how to get inside the trusted network, which is something we also try to help you with. And try then explain your business simply and explain very, very clearly what the attributes of your business are and why they match to the needs of that VC and PE firm. People tend to think the VCs are donors, investors are donors giving you money. They're not giving you money, they're investing money from other people like pension funds to try to make a return. So you need to make your business as attractive as possible at that particular time. So I suppose going back to what my tips would be, aside from getting on Qodeo, it's know who you are, only approach people at the right time, don't blow leads at the wrong time, and focus your attention on perhaps 20 to 50 leads you should try and speak to, what we in our terms call warm or hot leads. Don't spray when you're trying to raise funds.
Thank you, Simon. And I'm going to give a quick plug for a book called Venture Deals. A speaker at another conference recommended to me, and it's amazing. I see these terms like venture analyst, partner, managing partner, and I've read 30 pages so far. It's explaining everything, the positions of people, and also the different types of venture capital firms. And next up, we have Dennis, online marketing and sales manager at SalsUp, Europe's largest sales network and investment platform for startups, medium-sized businesses, and angels.
Thank you, Adam, for the introduction. And I would like to tackle one of the problems that you pointed out at the beginning. How do startups connect with each other and with partners or investors? A common misconception is the assumption that startups need one thing above all else, and that is capital. But we've learned that there's so much more when it comes to investments. So capital is, of course, also important, but what is crucial for the success of startups is the network and the know-how that the investor or partner brings to the table, as well as the sales figures, of course. And to get these points right, you need a comprehensive ecosystem, I would say. And that's what we've created at SalsUp, an ecosystem for innovation to connect startups with the right partners. Because we have noticed that the matching behavior between startups and established companies, especially in Europe and Germany, is changing rapidly. And in addition, the needs of each startup are so individual and specific that you need an ecosystem with a wide range of offerings. And that's where we come in, SalsUp, the matching platform for innovation. Whether you are a startup, a corporate member, or an investor, our platform and the integration of startups from Europe and, of course, also worldwide provides an overview within seconds, opens up opportunities to invest and to find matches for a successful cooperation. So we already have about 104,000 startup profiles on the platform, and they meet active and strong brands such as in Germany, for example, Edeka or Porsche or Flixbus, as well as private investors. In addition to this matching platform that we have built, we also have other pillars of this ecosystem. So this year we launched an initiative and a club with about 200 top entrepreneurs, which is called the Grow and the Grow Entrepreneurs Club. And in a mix of digital and hybrid events with top speakers from politics, science, and business, we explored and discussed the most relevant issues from the startup world. So the main goal is to keep startups in the DACH region, to drive innovation and to connect startups with the backbone of our economy, medium-sized businesses. And to come back to the question, We believe with the right network, ecosystem, idea, and a lot of hard work, of course, nothing stands in the way of a startup's success. So I hope to see you all at SalesUp and look forward to connecting with you there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Jessica, and she is Vice President for Private Equity and Venture Capital Investments at DEG KFW and chair of the 2X Challenge, a global initiative that has mobilized over $11 billion of gender lens investments since its launch at the G7 Summit in 2018. She has extensive experience originating, structuring, and executing debt, mezzanine, and equity deals in emerging and frontier markets. Among many roles, Jessica also serves on the advisory board of several private equity and venture capital funds, and she's a mentor for Endeavor.
Thank you so much, Adam, and hi, everybody. Great pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to tackle the same question, but from a slightly different perspective. And my advice, my one thing that I would recommend startups focus on is to really plan your rounds in advance and very strategically. Because if I look back at the startups that I've seen and that the PE funds and VC funds that I'm on the board on, kind of the most common mistakes have really been to rush into fundraising because you need the money now. And that is always a terrible negotiation position, and also terrible to really strategically look for the right type of investors. So I would recommend that you build relationships early. If I look back at some of the most successful unicorns in these portfolios, they have typically known the fund manager for at least 5 years. It's really interesting. Like from the very early days, they've been building these relationships, they've kept in touch, and then when they're ready to raise their round, they know this is the right partner and they can quickly close a deal. So that is one thing. Focus on building relationships early on. And the other thing, really plan your rounds in advance and have a clear roadmap of your scale-up journey. You can always be agile and adjust, but be very conscious of who's the right type of investor for your type of business and at what stage of your business as you scale up all the way, as was mentioned by one of my fellow speakers. And then finally, put yourself into the shoes of the investor. So don't only talk about your product. Of course, that is one of the absolute most crucial things, but also think about what you can offer the investor. How does your proposition fit into the investment thesis? And importantly, are you aligned with the type of investor that you're speaking to when it comes to the exit? Finally, I think, just be very, very conscious about what you're looking for beyond money. So what can the investor bring in terms of expertise, network, and all of the other types of things that can make your business successful? And that is much more than cash. Thank you so much.
Jessica, thank you so much. And next up, we have Raphael, co-founder of Getquinn, the social network for investors where members can aggregate their investments in one place and interact with a community of like-minded investors. Their aim is to make investing finally more inclusive and interactive.
Thanks, Adam, for the intro, and hi, everyone. Pleasure to connect with you. All about around the world. I actually missed the quiz. So yeah, we are as well Germany-based, Berlin-based company. I'll make a very quick introduction. I don't want to bore you about what we do, but it will help me actually answer your question better. Adam, I think we're all aware that increasingly amount of retail investors and often young retail investors are accessing capital markets, and usually the trading is very easy and quick. In a few clicks you can trade, but what is difficult is to know actually what to buy or what not to buy. And once you have a portfolio, how do you optimize your portfolio? And so what we do at Getquinn is that we build a platform that allows users to first of all track all their portfolios, be it in stocks, ETFs, cryptos, NFTs, and so on. And then at the second layer to interact with other investors to really get feedback on their portfolio, to ask about investment ideas. And this is now the link back to your initial questions. I feel, at least in my experience, we raised 2 larger rounds by investors such as Zeno, Runa Capital, and APX, amongst others. And to find as a company the right investors is a bit like as a retail investor to find the right securities. In my opinion, you shouldn't just blindly go out there and buy something or try to get money from investors. It should be really a process where you speak with, in my case, I spoke a lot to other entrepreneurs to really see if there would be a match with this fund or not, and it's the same that we encourage our clients to do as well. So not just following a trend, because what I often see is that companies just want money from one fund because the fund is all the time in the news, but maybe it's not the best fund to work with you. And so in our case, we are actually fundraising all the time. Why? Because we want to build these relationships with the people, really get to know the entire funds. And then when you're really ready to get the money, or to try to get the money, then we already have kind of an existing connection to the VCs. And this, like a little tip I would give to all the entrepreneurs that are now maybe doing a pre-seed or seed round, at least is what helped us a lot. And then as well, not sharing all the information at once. So we have been very picky on the information we were sharing with investors to make sure we would not just send actually important information just out there and actually not have people really look at them. So that's kind of my 2 cents on this. But happy to meet all of you.
Raphael, thank you so much. And now we are moving from COVID to investment advice to customer engagement advice. And we're going to talk with Frank from Twilio. And Frank is based in London, where he is Twilio Startups ecosystem developer for the EMA and global emerging markets. He has extensive experience working with international teams, and he acts as a startup BizOps mentor for Techstars and 500 startups. Now, Frank, I talk with a lot of startups who are fantastic at marketing and selling. They spend a lot of time and money on generating sales, but then they don't focus on delivery and they don't get renewals of their services as a result. So why do you think this is, and do you think startups should try to change their focus?
Firstly, thank you everyone, and thank you, Adam. Before I jump into it, I do think that's a great question, and I think one of the key things we have to look at is fundamentally when we're looking at between pre-seed to Series A, startups need to double down and focus more on retention before optimizing for growth. And I think one of the key ways they can do this is through customer engagement. I think it's great when you see metrics that you're scaling, or you've got really strong sales numbers, which tend to be sometimes false positives. But I think really it's about speaking to your customers, doing a lot of A/B testing, and really trying to understand what will bring them back to utilize or engage your product. And that really is all, I think it comes down to 2 key components, which is communications, which then informs your customer engagement.
Yeah, and then once you confirm customer retention, how do you focus on customer growth?
I think that is twofold. So I think, as I mentioned before, customer retention is really doing a lot of A/B testing. It's doing focus groups. It's really trying to understand why they'll utilize your product. One of the things we've seen at Twilio is throughout COVID, digital transformation was taking place at a massive scale and a massive pace. But really what was happening is a lot of companies are no longer choosing to outsource how they reach their customers or how they engage with them. They're choosing to actually build and be builders internally. And I think what the implications of this mean is that a lot of startups, a lot of founders have to really focus more on why customers are using their product, really trying to engage with them as much as possible. And what this means by and part is, as I mentioned before, how better quality communications empower better quality moments for your customers. This thereby has a knock-on effect on customer engagement, and it creates a virtuous flywheel which improves your product, thereby enabling you to scale or achieve the growth that you're looking for.
Yeah, and Frank, we've talked before about false positives in customer growth. Could you elaborate on that more a bit?
I think usually there's always a focus between pre-seed to Series A, naturally to get out your MVP, get it into the market. But I try to break it down into almost a series of almost MVTs, so like minimum viable tests, and really thinking about how are you reaching your customers, on what channel are you utilizing to reach them, and then seeing what the feedback is. I think the challenge is now that customers really want a multi-channel approach. Founders have to be thinking about this really from day one as they're looking to scale their businesses, not just focusing on growth, but also, again, reducing churn and retention. And this is really like a dual challenge that founders face. But I do think that once you focus on communications, empowering moments, understanding what are the right channels to reach your customers, the best companies that I've seen are those who are almost able to use data to preempt the right moments at the right times to reach their customers. And I think that's really what great customer engagement looks like. I think it's a key part of startup defensibility, because we've seen that IP is no longer, depending on the type of startup you're building, but if it's B2B or B2C, customer engagement tends to be a really powerful part of defensibility. And so startups were able to use, data to preempt and understand, what moment should they be reaching their customers? How should they be engaging with them? I think those are the types of businesses that are really going to stand the test of time as we go forward.
Thank you, Frank. And actually, I have an interesting poll results here. The differences between B2B and B2C startups in terms of reaching out to customers, engaging with them. What do you think of the poll results here? Does it surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me too much. I think what's really compelling is that we've always seen that email is going to be the foundation of pretty much how every startup, either B2B or B2C startups, are reaching their customers. So email marketing, transactional emails, they're really going to build on this as the foundation. I think what is really compelling is video calls. So video calls prior to COVID wasn't a substantial way that a lot of startups and businesses were engaging with their customers. But what we have begun to see is, video calls and phone calls actually going up as customers, again, are looking for a multi-channel approach to really how they engage with businesses. And so businesses that can really solve this problem at scale, because it's easy doing it maybe for 50 customers, but when we start hitting that inflection point of 900 customers plus, if you're able to provide a multi-channel approach, leverage the right type of data solutions to understand, when should I reach my customer via phone call or as opposed to email, I think that's when it becomes very compelling as a solution.
Great. Yeah, and actually it's interesting. I just shared our WhatsApp group because we're trying to figure out for communities with startups, do we use this channel, Slack, do we use WhatsApp? And really both of them have their limitations and their advantages as well. And I suppose at Twilio, you have a Twilio for Startups program. What do you guys do to actually retain your own customers and get them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So just for everyone on the call and everyone who's present at today's webinar, the Twilio for Startups program really aims to support startups that are between pre-seed and Series A. And the essence of what we try and do in the program is to really help founders think about how they're going to embed communications within their applications and their websites. What we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, is that great communications that is timely informs customer engagement, which informs product market fit and your capacity to scale. And so it's really getting founders to build that muscle to think about who their customers are, either B2B or B2C, and then understanding across the product lifecycle, where can Twilio add that value or support them as they're looking to reach their customers better. So that's a bit more about the program. I know, Adam, you're going to share more details about the perks within the chat, but if anyone's interested, please do ping me and I'd be happy to have a discussion with you about this after.
Brilliant, Frank. Well, look, thank you very much for that. It's nice to mix these 10-minute or so discussions with the 2-minute chats as well. So really appreciate it. Thank you. And next up, we have our 2-minute chats again. And Ralph Knoll is founder and CEO of InUpTech, which develops novel systems for human vision enhancement and protection. Ralph is also owner of Knoll Engineering and Consulting. And Ralph, we have a question. Name one book that has helped you on your startup journey and one lesson that you have learned from it.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, as you said, Adam, I'm actually an independent management consulting guy for the past 21 years. And of course, I have read many books. So it's almost impossible to recommend just one book. But let me put it maybe into other words. First of all, let me say two things about InUpTech. We are currently building the fastest glasses you can buy. They look like this. Let me show you this very quickly. What they do is they can distinguish different light sources. So if you have AR, for example, as an application, and you see in my background, there's nature, there's outdoors, humans cannot see against the sun. It's impossible. So this is why we are developing this device, and all the AR companies out there, they are interested in it. Now, coming back to the book. Of course, it's difficult to say, well, it depends on your age. If you're young, you might want to buy one of these guidebooks, these cookbooks to learn how startups work. But in the context of Corona and Brexit, we struggled as well. I would recommend any book which goes into the direction of strategy, long-lasting, so sustainable strategy. And I have one here. The Art of Strategic Conversation by Kees van der Heijden. It's about how to find your strategy to be really stable in the market so that you are not affected by Corona, that you're not affected by Brexit and stuff like this. And I like this book because it's very broad. It covers everything under the perspective of scenarios, and scenarios are very, very important. You need to really dive into this. It's called Scenario Technique or Scenario Methods. I can really recommend it. And generally speaking, please look also into philosophy and psychology books. I think this field is hugely underestimated. And therefore, I believe, yeah, it's more than just buying a guidebook from Amazon or kind of cookbook where you learn something. Well, it depends on your age. If you're young, it's all fine if you buy these books and have a look. But later on, you really need to focus on the high-level literature, on strategy first, thinking first, and then plan everything through, and then you are good to go.
Great, thank you so much. And actually, in the past few conferences, we've asked this question, and 0 to 1, no doubt, is also the most recommended book. I will not be surprised if one of the speakers will recommend it. So
I wanted to recommend something differently.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want the same thing all the time. Next up, we have Nina Levchuk, Startups and VCs and Technology Lead at Google. And Nina, your question is, you meet some seriously ambitious companies and founders. Are there certain skill sets and traits you have observed in the highest performing founding teams that our audience could learn from?
Thank you so much, Adam, for having us today here. So far, super fantastic conference. And thank you for your short info. I would say, if you think about that question and the typical answers that you would hear everywhere, or you would read in any article or in any book, that there is, I would say, 3 major pillars that make every founding team or founder as a leader successful. And it's probably all will be around focus. So ability like to bring focus to the team and help the founding team to deal and go through the chaos and roller coasters that they gonna face on every single stage, climbing to success, right, or to the exit. The second one would be around bringing efficiency to the team, right, and as well kind of unite the team around the mission. But I think what COVID really showed us that nowadays the top skill set that every successful founder requires is not so hard coming from the hard skills, but actually even more and more coming from the soft skill. So my personal view on that question, what would be the top skill set of the founder with whom I would love to work or invest, that would be, of course, dealing with ambiguity and lead through uncertainty. That's number 1. Number 2 is lead with the courage. That's mean the bringing values of the companies and unite people around values, or from the first days. No, not when you're already 100 people in the startup, but actually where you just 10 or 20 and kind of cultivate this value and culture within the company and build the loyalty. And maybe the last one, but definitely not least, is around be patient and resilient, right? So really make sure that you could lead your team through the very hard times, and you're passionate about ups and downs, and always communicate the positive vibes back and inspire and empower your team. So in the nutshell, that would be my top skill set that I would love to see in the founders with whom I'm working.
Nina, thank you so much. Next up, we have Patty Lee, CEO and co-founder of Orbit Health. Orbit's mission is to enable effective early intervention and personalized care for chronic diseases by harnessing the power of sensor and AI technologies. Its first solution, Neptune, is a smartwatch agnostic AI solution that helps Parkinson's patients attain optimal symptom control through effective treatment personalization. And we'll return to the book question for you, Patty.
Thanks, Adam. And first, thank you very much for having me and Orbit here. I think for us, because our aim is really around the patients to enable them to live better lives, and a lot of the effort that we're doing currently sits in the Parkinson's field. For us, people is really important. And I think I add on to actually what Nina just said. My favorite, one of the books that actually the entire organization has been exploring and reading right now, it's called Legacy. It's actually a book by James Kerr. And on the surface, it's a book about the All Blacks. It's the world's most successful sporting team. People who don't know about All Blacks, they're actually a rugby team from New Zealand. And they're actually the most successful sporting team in the world among all sports. They win 3 out of 4 games for the last 100 years, and it's amazing. So on the surface, it's really about sports, but actually what it's about culture. It's about forming high-performing culture, forming the right company culture and leadership to make sure that we can have a team that can continuously win and be on top of the game. We as a company actually spent 2 days last week to co-create our company culture, aligning the individual values with the company value. We asked our team, what is the most important thing that they think Orbit should stand for and be, and what would make you wake up every day just want to go to work. And I think in the end, it's really not the product that makes the company special. It's really the people behind the company that makes the company special. And so, I really, really recommend this book because in the end, I think for a company to be successful, it's really about cultivating the right culture, making sure that we do the right thing. And a lot of it depends on the people that we recruit and bring to our team. And they're the guiding principles, these values that we guide how we make decisions, how we recruit people, and what behavior we uphold to be what we call our orbiters.
Yeah, thank you, Paddy. And you remind me of a YouTube channel called Evan Carmichael, and it's top 10 tips from Steve Jobs, from Mark Zuckerberg, from Ronaldo, from Messi, from lots of sports people and actors, because if they're successful in one field, they could be successful in others. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Mark, Head of Growth at Planetly, a climate tech company developing digital tools that enable companies to analyze, reduce, and compensate their CO2 emissions. Planetly's declared goal is to make the business world planet positive. And it's the book question again.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Really, really cool to be here. As mentioned, I'm Head of Growth at Planetly. We're a technology company helping companies out there to manage their carbon footprint, become more sustainable. And we do that with the power of technology. And if you happen to be interested in that field, please do reach out. I would be very much interested in pursuing conversations with you. But as Adam put it, this is about learnings, sharing learnings. So I'll share a book recommendation that helped me back a couple of years already in the early days when I started helping to build up ventures, still in another role, but again, also helpful for my learnings at Planetly. And it's called Predictable Revenue. It's by Aaron Ross. It's sort of like a Silicon Valley sales and growth Bible. I think it's like next to 0 to 1. It's one of the classic reads. And the reason why I recommend it is a short read, but it's very precise. And if you're new to the B2B software game and to growth, especially marketing and sales, it's just a very, very great introduction where you can learn a lot about how to set up teams. And that's a learning number 1 already, the value of organization in B2B growth organizations, how you specialize, when you specialize, and how you really need to break up your organization into marketing and sales development and sales and customer success teams early on to build a machine. And the second learning I want to share is that sales is not random. And that's like just the main message of that book. It can be a predictable machine. And you as a manager, as a founder, have to take on that mission of thinking about this day and night of how to move beyond randomness into building a predictable machine. That I found very powerful as well. And this to me is not only the org build and the activity split, it's also the smart setting of KPIs and target tracking. And the big story around this book is also around no stupid outbounding. Don't do stupid outbounding. The larger your prospects get, the more effort you need to put also in pre-sales qualification before you even reach out. And then last but not least, I think this book tells a great story about B2B sales and how you need a long-term perspective to succeed in the end, moving beyond the random early wins towards that aforementioned predictable machine. So in general, a book I would highly recommend to any founder building a B2B software company. then just because it's again about knowledge sharing, I think a platform that has been super helpful for me is SaaStr by Jason Lemkin as well. I think that's just another reference I wanna bring up on the table here. It's a collection of CEO interviews of that have founded companies across the globe. Again, heavy B2B and sales focus, but SaaStr really is a great learning tool as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Next up, we have Latha, co-founder and CPO of FinMarie, Germany's leading fintech firm focused on serving women. Her mission is developing the technology and services that address women's professional potential and closing the investment and pension gaps.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And yeah, I checked your list actually of books to see if my book recommendation was on it. It is not. So I'm gratified to see that. No, that's great. That means we have more books, right? And one of the things I love about being a book recommendation person today is that, you know, I think we can read a lot of blogs, we can read a lot of tweets, but when you read a book, you have a relationship with it. It really sinks into you. And so that's why the book that I'm going to recommend is not really on startup lists usually. This is a book that I read years ago. It's called The First 90 Days. It's by Michael Watkins. And this book is one that it's sunk into me. It's stuck with me. This is a book that was instructive for me, and it's a book that I recommend to others. So in business, I find that you are constantly, you are upgrading yourself. You are constantly in a transition as a leader, and your staff needs to be constantly in transition in their roles as well. So this book is about transitions in business. It's about the common problems. It's about creating early wins in your business. And it's about a lot of practical suggestions for accelerating your learning. And, you know, what is that if not great advice for startups? So when I think about what a startup is, it's a series of transitions. You know, when Frank earlier was talking about these minimum viable tests that you have to run as a startup, you are constantly thinking about where are we as a startup? Are we still starting up? Do we need to turn around? You know, do we need a realignment? Do we need to start sustaining this success? So these are the 4 stages that Michael Watkins would have you look at and think about as a leader when you are looking at a business that you're coming into during your first 90 days. But I would suggest that as startup people, we should constantly be reevaluating where our business is. Are we still starting up, or is it time to do a pivot? I think one of the things that we've seen during COVID is that a lot of companies needed to do a realignment, to do a pivot. And this book really provides a lot of valuable suggestions about, you know, go and talk to your suppliers, go and talk to your partners, get ideas from your audience, get ideas from all up and down the company before you make that pivot, before you make that turn, and before you set your mind in motion. But you can't always stay where you are today. And so I think this book has been so effective for me in my life and as a recommendation because we are constantly in transition.
Okay, danke. Next up, we have Lara Esnaula. Lara is a co-founder and general manager of Care with Care, a healthcare recruitment and training platform aiming to solve the 200,000 plus nursing staff shortage in Europe. Before, Lara was CEO of Care.com's international business with presence in over 20 countries and 30 million plus members. She's a mentor at Endeavour, and in 2017 started an initiative to train refugee women to access the German labour market. And Lara, the book question for you again.
Thank you, Adam. Well, my book is Dog by Phil Knight. And this is a memoir about the early days at Nike, the shoe company. It's a very different industry to what we do at Care with Care. Shoes versus training human beings to find jobs across borders. But a lot of the book resonated, particularly the question around how do you start a business from day one that is truly global and that is dependent on global supply chains, and particularly that is very sensitive to externalities that you simply cannot control. So there are big corporations that have entire teams thinking about this all day long, but startups, we don't have that cushion. So in the case of Nike, they were headquartered on the West Coast in the US. The market was in the US, and they started producing shoes in Japan. And they had to face with cultural differences, supply chain problems, logistic breakdowns, export-import restrictions. If you read the book, first of all, it's really fun. And second, you will think that it's basically a miracle that Nike survived the early days. My 2 lessons learned that I wanted to share with you today is, the first one is a message of hope. If you're doing a startup that is global in its ambitions, you can do it. It may not be easy, but go for it. I started this program, this company in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and here we are, like, growing and figuring things out. The second one is identify the biggest risks to your business, the biggest problems that will make it or fail in the company. And as a startup, at first, you may put those problem areas in the hands of third parties, in the hands of others. But if you truly want to grow, and if you truly want to be successful, my recommendation is own your problems. Own them, figure them out, and that's the only way to truly, in the long term, to scale and be successful. Recommend Shoe Dog.
Yeah, I've read it. It's amazing. So good recommendation. Next up, we have Ashish, Vice President of Product Strategy and Head of European Expansion at Bank Open, India's biggest neobanking platform for SMEs. Ashish is currently leading the European launch and expansion for Bank Open. In previous roles, he has scaled multiple initiatives from the ground up at top startups in India and Europe. And our question for you is different. You have seen some really great startups scale and now are getting back to launching a product in a new market. What are the key learnings that you would like to share with people building things from the ground up?
Thank you very much, Adam. And first of all, this is great platform, and thank you very much for bringing this all together for co-learning. So it's learning for all of us, including all the panelists. And just to kind of reiterate, so we at Bank Open are the first and biggest B2B neobank in India. We have a growing and exponential growing presence in Southeast Asia, and I'm kind of leading the European expansion, starting from Europe, and then eventually also kind of getting to US markets. Now, getting back to the question, I think the startup kind of journeys have been really, really amazing, and I've been involved in that for quite a few years, more than a decade. And I think some things are really solved structurally, and some things, for example, the cost of starting a startup has come down significantly. Some of the more nuanced approach, which was really limited to Silicon Valley knowledge, has kind of more democratized. For example, with the event of Y Combinators and other really great accelerator programs, there is a clear recipe of how to start a startup and how to kind of take it to scale. So we know now that we need to kind of know who our customers are, what are the kind of real problems that they need to solve. How do we kind of become a painkiller or or a vitamin for them, and then a really continuous iterative cycle of retention, engagement, monetization, and growth. And companies like Twilio are really kind of helping that out. So I saw Frank talking about it. Some of these companies have really made it democratized, so every startup can really kind of get to it. I think we really need startup founders to know that the problems that they have been solved, and they're like structural companies who are out there who have a recipe to kind of solve them. So that's one. But I think if I kind of abstract myself a little bit out of the weeds and a little bit more at a macro level, I think I like to call audacious ferocity as one of the key and the most important thing that makes or break a startup. And let me kind of spend a minute on that. So I believe setting up really audacious goal is really, really important. You don't want to have a goal which is achievable, which is achievable plainly and simply. You always want to set a goal which looks very, very, very hard to kind of achieve. So I know people like Finmari, and we have friends over from there, and Yoona, who just spoke about it, and they have really audacious goal. And Planetly, I'm really impressed with these three organizations. But having that is one leg of the thing. After that, you really want to kind of have a real structured, strategic approach. So spend time, know what your game plan is before you start executing. But then really the key is execution, right? So all of your audacious goal and strategy calls for nothing if the execution is not really that great. So I think eventually, unfortunately, a lot of literature out there talks about all these three in isolation. So there are books about thinking big, audacious goals, etc. There are books about strategy, a lot of them, and there are books about execution skills. But the real important thing is how do you kind of take all of them together and not get overwhelmed with one of them. So I know I've seen founders getting overwhelmed with just their strategy or getting overwhelmed with just their execution, or once they get into execution, they keep on self-doubting themselves with every small problem that, hey, am I doing the right thing? Or should I kind of go back to my strategy and redo it? So I think audacious ferocity is the most important thing, in my opinion, to kind of get there. And while we are recommending books, I love to recommend Our Iceberg is Melting. It's about culture. It's a little bit about audacious ferocity, but in a much more lighter note and much more storytelling way of educating things.
Great, thank you very much. And now we will go on to another 10-minute session. And this time we have David, Head of Growth Marketing International Expansion at Fiverr. And really, we're going to talk about outsourcing. So what is outsourcing, David, and when should it be used?
Thanks for having me today, Adam, and also to address the topic of how to efficiently outsource, because I think it's very, very critical, especially for startups, and it empowers them to be very agile and elevate their business to new levels. What is outsourcing? It's basically a business practice that describes hiring a third party outside of your company to perform services or create productions that were traditionally performed in-house by your company's own employees. However, the traditional way of outsourcing mostly happened offline. And that's also a change COVID brought, and also accelerated our business at Fiverr, because the traditional offline, let's say, sourcing of freelancers is very lengthy and has a lot of uncertainties. Everybody who have been there already understands the headaches which are attached to it, from, let's say, sourcing the right service providers or freelancers to negotiating contracts, communication, submitting deliverables to invoicing, etc., etc. We were looking at the timeframes which the traditional way took, and it's 30 days, from basically looking for a right provider to basically signing a contract. And this is where I think Fiverr makes a real difference, because the average time from arriving on the site, on the platform, to placing an order takes about 15 minutes. And you can do the math, how agile and how quick you can scale up with such online platforms. And on top of this, of course, we have a lot of functionalities built in our platform, which gives you a lot of securities. A transparent rating system, so you absolutely know what to expect when to work with a vendor, secured payments, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you for that brief explanation. And I just want to say hello to my video editor on Fiverr, who will edit this video. My logo is also done on Fiverr, so I've known about Fiverr for years, David. But the thing is, I love outsourcing. It is a huge part of my business, but you do have to be careful sometimes. You have to do it in the right way. And I'm just going to share the results here and explain what I mean by that. So have you used outsourcing before? 78% of startups here say yes, that's great. If yes, what have you outsourced? A lot of IT, a lot of accountancy, a lot of other, and I'd love to know what that other is. But what I want to talk about is number 3. Have your experiences of outsourcing been always positive, mostly negative, or always negative? And 70% of people say mostly positive. And I would have to agree, David. So we talked about this before, trust validation. I had to find a translator for my Spanish website. And sometimes on Fiverr, you have to try 3 or 4 or 5 people. So I gave a €5 translation to 4 people, and one of them, they all did a good job, but one of them I really liked. He did it quickly. He did it in a neat way, so I picked him. But what would be your advice for people in terms of outsourcing and doing it properly?
I mean, first of all, absolutely. Thanks for the question. But you need to understand, what you are looking for. Yeah, a lot of people, and this is something I also experienced from my past startup life. Yeah, they have insane ideas. Yeah, and they are not, let's say, aligning their expectations to what a service provider actually can do. So briefing is absolutely essential. The better the briefing and the communication upfront before you engage with a freelancer is absolutely essential to set expectations. And then I think also, I mean, when it comes down to more complex, let's say, tasks which you want to outsource, set milestones, yeah, and follow up on them. Basically create a framework where you and the freelancer or the third party absolutely agrees to a certain time frame, to the amount of work you want to get done, and stay in touch. Communication here is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and then in terms of outsourcing, I had a question. Should outsourcing be always used, or is in-house development sometimes better?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, you should not outsource, let's say, crucial parts of your business. Yeah, your core parts should remain in your domain. And here, I mean, I'm talking about or thinking about data, yeah, which is most likely for a lot of startups, they're gems. Yeah, you should be very, very careful on what you give out and what you really, protect. But there are a lot of, let's say, ways to also collaborate with third parties who are not in your organization to help you out.
Yeah, and I think we can close the conversation on another poll result. So this is just German startups. What mistakes have they made? And I can see insufficient funds is really the top one right now. And yeah, I totally agree. I think I see a lot of startups hiring people for full-time roles that they don't need to hire people for full-time roles for. And that's a very good thing about outsourcing. So David, thank you very much. And we'll go back to the 2-minute chats. Yeah, cheers. Thank you. So next up, folks, we have a 5-minute presentation from Catherine Jacob, founder of California Business Associates, which gives US market entry and business development advice to international companies in the agricultural and food tech and plant biotech industries. And she will talk about US market entry for German startups and scale-ups.
All right, thanks so much, Adam. And I want to dive right in. And at the beginning of my presentation, I want to emphasize, if you come to the United States, on 3 main things. One is to really get to know the US culture or the Silicon Valley culture. Do your due diligence and move fast. And if you hold on to those 3 principles, you most likely will be successful. And I go a little bit more into this. Knowing the US, we are a Western country, we speak all English, but Silicon Valley really is difficult in the so-called Silicon mindset, and you might have heard of this. Often delegations come over here and are really surprised how it works in Silicon Valley. People are different, they are enthusiastic, they are much more positive than usually the Germans, and the Germans are usually a little bit more reserved. And it's hard when you have a team working in the United States and in Germany sometimes to mindset. So if you can someone or actually a few people over here to really immerse yourself and learn about this, this will really help with your communication. The second is do your due diligence. As people are very positive here in the United States, it's very important that you learn about people. You need to learn what they are saying to understand what they really mean and make sure you can trust those people. And this is not only for a consultant you want to work with, this is also for an advisor and even for your investor. Make sure, ideally, you get referrals, you check, have with some people, what have they worked with, have they really worked with companies? This is very, very important. And things are moving fast. Get used to working outside of your normal hours in Germany. Try to answer emails very quickly. If you have a customer on hand, they can go very fast to someone else if you're fast enough in your answers. So you have to get out of your comfort zone time-wise. If you want to come to the United States, you want to think right from the beginning when you set up your company. Do you want to come straight and build your company here, or do you want to like go into the market first in Germany, build really stably your company, and then expand into the United States? And you have many different options to do so. You want to move your headquarters? Do you just want to build a sales team? You just want to have a distributor? These all have different implications. And I just want to emphasize, you have to make sure you do the right steps. As an example, if you want to come to the United States and you want to change your GmbH into an American subsidiary or an American company, make sure you do the right steps. This can have huge tax implications. There have been cases that really went wrong on this. How do you want to scale into the United States? Again, you can bring your own money, you can bootstrap, but many come actually for the market. It's a huge market in the United States and for the capital. And Silicon Valley is still a good center for that. It's an interesting ecosystem. Just as an example, investments in the ag and food tech first half of the year was about 8 billion in the United States compared to 0.8 billion in Germany. So you have still good access to capital, huge capital available. Things have changed. Germany now, investors also investing in Germany, but it's still a good market to come into the United States. So you could also think about an acquisition actually if you want to come here, because you might have a good add-on to your company and then you already have the customer base. What's really important, as soon as you make a contract, may it be for an incorporation or for a distributor or a salesperson or a consultant, make sure it's a really ironclad contract, which is done by an US lawyer. I can really recommend this. There are lawyers in Germany who have US experience, but make sure it's also in the state you are going to. We have different states, different regulations, even for your product when you have to register. Different implications in all areas, from employer laws to, again, regulation, etc. So make sure you have a lawyer who really can do this. It's expensive in Silicon Valley, but it's really worth it. And you also have to kind of understand what the lawyer is saying in those contracts. Really try to understand actually the contracts too. If you come to the United States, make sure you are prepared financially and in your mindset. Don't stretch yourself. It's really expensive. It quickly becomes very expensive. So you need to sit down, write those numbers down. How much does the sales team cost? How much does the marketing cost, etc. And then make sure you have those resources. Is it actually, you can have a good market in Germany. Is it the same market? Make sure it's still the same product market fit. And do I have to change my go-to-market strategy, or is it the same strategy? So we really have to think all those things. As an example, in agriculture, if you have a product tested in Germany, in a field, it does not apply. You have to do the experiments here in Germany, in the United States. Nobody will actually not really accept if you have done the experiments in Germany. You have to come here and do this. It gets really expensive very quickly also. Conditions are completely different. So of course you have trademark protection, etc. This is a must. I think that many companies have that. Also think about, can you actually deliver? If you have a hardware or production for a product like a biologics, think about it. Suddenly you have a distributor and he says, I need a product for 1 million hectares. Are you able to produce this? Do you have the manufacturing? And then that goes actually back into what we just heard. Can you actually outsource things? Do you do it in-house? You have to think about all of those things. And I don't know how much more time I have, but so you come for money most likely, and you might want to have investment in the United States. And we're going to talk about, investors coming up here too. But put yourself into the shoes of an investor. He sees many founders every day, and he has built companies successful and he has seen them fail. So if he looks at you, he knows which type of person and founder can be successful. And what's a very important trait, I want to say, is really you need to listen. You need to be able to listen and then also react and pivot. Listen to your investor, listen to your advisor, and listen to your customers. This is a very important trait. Again, investors can say quickly quickly through you if you are a person who can do this, and this will decide about if you can get funding or not. And the second thing I have observed, particularly with German founders, they are usually, it's the typical engineering. They are so in the engineering, they forget the business case. This has improved too, but make sure the investor is there to make money. So luckily today they also invest in very important environmental courses, about the planet, etc. This has changed in Silicon Valley. So they want to do good too, but make sure you have a business case. And usually the vision is not large enough too. And somebody mentioned that before. You have to have a huge vision and you have to have a huge business case. And again, German founders are often too humble with their pitches and with their vision. So one more thing specifically for the agtech and food tech industry. When you go to a customer, make sure he becomes your partner. He will be your best ally. Listen to him again. He will help you continue to develop the product, and he will be your best referral if he can refer a customer, of course. But also look at the bigger picture in a supply chain, because you might be able to change what your particular customer does, but does it interrupt actually the supply chain before and after? So you have to kind of look at the bigger picture, and you might want to reel in some partners which can help with the before and after too. And I guess these are my 2 cents on the United States.
Well, Katrine, that's a really fantastic introduction to our next section, which is the Silicon Valley section. So thank you so much for that. A lot of value in a few minutes. Our next section is German entrepreneurs in the United States, from Silicon Valley to the East Coast as well. And our first speaker in this section will be Thomas, founder of the Transatlantic AI Exchange and Senior Director of Strategic Business Development and Innovation at Intel. Thomas is also chair and co-founder of the German-American Business Association Northern California, an alliance of corporations, organizations, and professionals with the purpose of strengthening transatlantic business. And Thomas, our question is, you meet some seriously ambitious companies and founders. Are there certain skill sets and traits you have observed in the highest performing founding teams that our audience could learn from?
Hi, everybody. It's a very good question. And I think the answer is actually very, in my opinion, very simple. And the good thing is actually it doesn't cost you much measured by money. What I mean by that is that I worked with many startup companies, but also established organizations. And I really experienced all kinds of different managers and founders. But by the end of the day, it's really all about people, no matter what. Right? So if you put that in your mind, then founders must really have, first of all, a very big vision. At the same time, they should really have really good listening skills and the ability to motivate and inspire people. That's really the job of a CEO, of a founder, moving forward. The other one is, for me, the founders' personalities and the management style really define how the teams act. And the culture that will be defined around a startup company or even a mid-sized company. Same actually goes for a senior manager within a bigger corporations. So overall, I'm personally a really huge fan of leading by example, but at the same time allow the individuals to define solutions to a given problem. People are normally pretty awesome and smart, and they want to work hard. At the same time, people are willing to work hard in startups, and they also go the extra mile if they are being acknowledged, even just, simply verbally by senior management. In most cases, it's really never about the money, or it's not at least, all about the money. And if you really show as a founder or as a team that you truly care about people, and I'm talking about employees, I'm talking about the partners, I'm talking about the customers, and you recognize outstanding contributors, you can also provide a platform for people to thrive. People will, there's just no doubt about it. So to sum this really all up, in my opinion, it doesn't cost much for a founder to reward verbally and acknowledge, and people will thrive and they will give their very best. So it's, at the end of the day, it doesn't cost you anything. It just simply a principle, something that in most cases, because you're busy, you have deadlines, you want to have revenue. By the end of the day, if it comes to founders and leadership, it's about people. Allow them to thrive. They will step up to the plate. They will deliver. They probably go beyond the extra mile, and it doesn't cost you a penny. Just keep that in mind, because you always get sucked into the daily stuff, and then you just get into this rat hole. So for me, that's really the biggest takeaway of all. If I may add one more comment, if by any chance anybody after this session has a little bit time to spare, and if it's okay, I will put something in the text here in the chat. I have a session around the GABA and also the Transatlantic AI Exchange, literally in 33 minutes. There's a session that's free, and talking about humbled people, super successful people. One of the most humbled leaders I've ever met in my 30 years career in Silicon Valley. It's the president and the chief financial officer of Salesforce. He was the CFO of Dell. He was the CFO of Logitech, of Autodesk, and Salesforce. He will speak in 30 minutes about what I'm just talking about with one of the most successful entrepreneurs, a German entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, who has a fund, who started many companies, and he's a professor at Stanford. So in 30 minutes, check it out. Otherwise, I would say it's not that difficult. It's all about people. Just acknowledge them. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next up, we have Neeraj. And Neeraj, you are founder and general partner of TED Ventures, a food tech-focused venture fund backed by the Balzan family. He's a tech entrepreneur and investor whose achievements include co-founding Sprig, a food delivery startup that scaled to 1,200 employees and raised $60 million from top VCs. He was named in the Forbes under 30 lists at this time. And Neeraj, our question for you: you've built a number of startups in San Francisco. What lessons would you give to new founders who want to follow in your footsteps?
Thank you for having me, Adam. Really appreciate it. I think it's an interesting question. I won't get into the technical and logistics part. I think the answer that Katrine gave was really excellent, and I thought she brought up a lot of great points. So I'll just bring up 3 things that I think all entrepreneurs should be thinking about, and I think are even more important when you're talking about the US market. The first one is, and I think this is true about anything you build. If you want to build a company, you need to build something that is worth building, and has a reason to exist. And the way you do that is by solving an important problem. And I think this is especially even more true in the US. There are more entrepreneurs. There's, sometimes there's even more ambition. There's more risk tolerance. And the way you build a business that, you solve an important problem is you have to deeply understand a customer, and you have to be customer obsessed. You need to know a customer better than they know themselves. You need to know their problems better than they know themselves. And all this means that you need to stop thinking about yourself. You don't matter in this equation. You're not building a company because you want to build a company. You're building a company because you're going to solve a customer's problem. And so that's the number one thing. The second thing that I think is especially true in the US market, and particularly in Silicon Valley, is you should be bold. And you should not think about, as you're solving a customer's problem, don't think about incremental improvement. You should be thinking about paradigm shifting benefits that you can offer a customer. Nobody cares about being 5% better. They want to think about, how do you make a step function change and dramatically change and dramatically improve the world in some way, or dramatically improve a customer's life or their operations or their business potential or whatever it is. You should be bold in how you're thinking about it. And that's probably the only way to really get any sort of attention abroad. And the third thing is, once you have kind of figured out a North Star of what you're going to build, a really important skill set is you need to become an excellent storyteller. And this is true for fundraising. This is true for hiring. This is true for sales. This is true for everything that you do as an entrepreneur. Your job is going to fundamentally come down to how well you are able to storytell, how well, how much you're able to evangelize your mission. As an entrepreneur, you are someone who sees a future that nobody else sees, and you understand how the world is moving and how your business or your product or your service is going to come in and dramatically improve the world for better. And your job is to come back to reality, come back to the modern day, and convince everybody else that what you see in the future is true, and get people to buy into your mission and your vision. And if you can do those three things, solve an important problem, be bold, and storytell, I think you have a really great start in building a company in Silicon Valley.
Raj, thank you so much. Next up, folks, we have Ekaterina Grib, co-founder and CFO of qodeo. They digitize construction with robotics and data. qodeo offers robotic construction lifts for transportation of materials on site. And our question for you is, you have recently raised a fund from SV investors. How different is the fundraising experience in Germany and the US?
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me. And qodeo, it's really nice to talk to such big audience and to share our experience. So we are a German startup. We are not based in Silicon Valley, and I think it's an important detail here. And we recently closed our Series A round with German investors, but also with US Silicon Valley investors in a lead place. It's True Ventures. I think that there are certain differences and similarities between US investors and German investors, but one of the things I wanted to underline is the process was much faster. Of course, maybe it's also correlated with the fact that now we are later in a process, now a development than at the first investment round and at the seed. So we were raising Series A. But also it's very interesting to see how different it is in States and how different it is in Germany, how important truly storytelling is. I can only agree with the previous speaker, and how important it is to underline your mission and your vision, and your vision is truly has to be big and interesting for people to take care about. Whereas in Germany, I think it would be, at least from our experience, more pragmatic. Also, at least the seed stages, we spend more time for fundraising than now with Series A, but of course it could be also stage related. And another important thing that I want to share with the startups, I think it matters if you, and I also saw it in the questions, if you have incorporation or if you have GmbH, which is in Germany, because many US investors actually hesitate to invest in a German legal entity because it's much more complicated. So if you would like, or if you see your future in States and you didn't yet do incorporation, I would say then to proceed with incorporation. But if you are a German startup staying in Germany, you would still go with GmbH. Generally, I think depending on what are your expectations, the vision of the company, and I think the market, if you intend to go to US market or not, depending on this, you can decide whether you're going for German investors or for US investors. But in any case, I think it's really important to see the both worlds, and it's very interesting for us now to see and to have both European and investors, European and American investors on board. So those are my thoughts. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it really was. Thank you so much. Next up, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. We have Simon Elise, founder and community designer of MatchLab N, a professional development program to master digital fluency. Simon arrived in Silicon Valley in 2011 with only one piece of luggage and an idea. And despite the advice of her family, she put her secure corporate career in Germany on hold and followed her California dream. Love it. And Simon, you've built a number of startups in San Francisco. What lessons would you give to new founders who want to follow in your footsteps?
Welcome, everybody. Yes, I meet so many amazing people here in Silicon Valley, and everybody has crazy ideas in their head. But when I tell them, let's go for it, everybody's like, oh my God, I just can't do this. Today, I also want to share 3 pieces of advice which helped me get MatchLab N out of my head and into the world. So number 1 is actually fear gets into your way, right? So by asking yourself, what's actually the worst thing it could happen? If you do this, in my case, it was over $1 per month investment because of no-code technologies. So that was a no-brainer to start it. Number 2 advice is don't build a stadium without even knowing who your fans are and also what they want. So I'm German since 10 years here in California, but I still have this perfectionism gene in me. But this time I really decided to go the opposite way. So I didn't prepare any fancy materials. Instead, I built in public together with clients in real time and live. And looking back, this was actually a really good choice because I saved so much time and money because I made so many wrong assumptions in the beginning, which leads actually to my third advice. It's if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. But if you want to build something and go beyond, you go together. And this is actually how I live every day in my community. So I show up and authentic, but also vulnerable. I ask for advice, but I also give without expecting anything in return. And this made me actually turn my clients into true friends who believe in me and in my and want that I succeed. And this is actually what I give you. If you have an idea in your mind today, just connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me your dreams.
Okay, thank you so much. Next up, we have Ralph, founder and CEO of 8W8 Global Business Builders, which empowers founders and business owners to create compound value and deliver the full potential of their enterprise. He has held several board and C-level positions throughout the years. Ralph, you meet some seriously ambitious companies and founders. And as we asked before, are there certain skill sets and traits you see among them?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. Schönen guten Tag. Just like many, I came to the US with a tech company. In my case, it was DoubleClick Google, actually from Hong Kong, and I lived in the UK and Germany before. In fact, I'm also a lead mentor of the German Accelerator in New York and member of the selection committee. I launched 8W8 Global Business Builders to empower growth companies by providing the CoFQ SaaS value creation platform. So to get straight back to your question, yes, for sure. First of all, the vast majority of founding teams don't really deliver the full potential of the enterprise. So the question is spot on. What is it that sets the winners apart? For sure, there's no secret sauce for a successful UX expansion. First, so those who succeed have a clear understanding of their status quo. They know what it is going on and what they need to do and are not too shy to ask. Secondly, they define their priorities and only then define their focus. They have a plan and focus only on the strategic initiatives that really matter, which is easier said than done, especially in fast-moving tech where there's so much that you could do all the time. If they have in one way or another frameworks, methods, and software tools for value creation in place, this becomes much, much easier. If any of you don't have this, you better implement such quickly. As a result of leveraging best practices, they don't get sidetracked easily and don't jump on every single opportunity outside the very core. So keep in mind, in scale-up land, less is most often much more, and focus wins. To conclude, you need to assess the IQ of your company, use smart tools for strategy execution, and learn and evolve on an ongoing basis. It is all about execution and compounding strategies. This altogether will do the trick. And if I may summarize the single steps, first you do the assessment, followed by alignment, create transparency, set priorities, then focus, strategy develop, tracking, reporting, then assess and adjust and repeat. If you like to read up on all of this, feel free to go on our website, aw8.com, and check out the CoFQ Knowledge Center there. It's for free, and follow us on social. Thank you very much for having me, Adam. Please have the audience reach out if there are any questions. Congratulations for hosting such a great event. Schönen Abend an alle aus New York.
Yeah, danke. that's the extent of my German. Thank you, Ralph. Next up, we have Peter, Head of Partnerships and Sales, Americas at ScoutBee, an AI-powered supplier discovery suite that helps procurement leaders gain deep supplier insights to make more confident buying decisions. Peter previously worked at SAP SAP SE for 13 years. He holds a number of patents and is a winner of top-notch innovation awards. He also holds a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the Technical University of Munich. Peter, what are the key elements to your startup success in the United States?
Thanks, Adam. Pleasure to be here. The most important element for our success here in the US is actually earning the trust of our customers every day. Always going the extra mile, listening before talking, and never to overpromise, but overdeliver. So great product quality is one ingredient for success, but never forget that from kindergarten on, US customers are used to enjoying a level of customer service that is way beyond the German standard. Never forget that if you want to be successful here. On top, make it simple, really simple, to understand what you have to offer. Why customers should actually buy from you and not the competition, which is really strong here. And what exactly is it that is in it for them, for your customers? Make it easy for your customers to say yes to your offer. And always, always play as a band. You know how powerful it is to be at a rock concert and to see everyone on stage play as one. Customers don't like one-person shows. They will love engaging with you if you play as one with your whole team. And finally, always go the extra mile and keep playing, particularly in challenging situations like the current pandemic, chip shortages, and supply chain nightmares. Just had the major storm here. Customers may forget everything you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And they will come back for more if you just made them feel valued. So don't just focus on strategy, product quality, and technical details. These are really important. But the most important thing is focus on making your customers happy. And that will help you be very successful in the US as well. Thanks, Adam. It's a wonderful conference.
Peter, fantastic speech. Yeah, really, really good. Remember the people, not just the product. Very good. And next up, we have Dirk, co-founder of Upland Me, the Earth's metaverse based on blockchain technology. He's a serial entrepreneur, having started companies in Europe and the US. And he has worked in various executive roles, CEO, COO, CFO in small and large organizations. Dirk is also the author of a best-selling book on Amazon, and he has a PhD for research work and doctoral thesis about private and state-controlled currencies. And our question for you, Dirk, is, you have been in the Valley for over 13 years. What has changed in the last few years? Do you believe it will change even more, or will it most likely stay the same?
Yeah, so thank you first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Let me start with, what is basically the same when you're an entrepreneur from Germany, considering moving to Germany, you have to also know, of course, an entrepreneur, you always, bootstrap on money. Silicon Valley is still very expensive to live in, right? So when you want to come here, you need to know that when you even come with your family, want to rent out the house, you easily pay $5,000 to $7,000 a month, right, just to rent a nice house. So you need to be conscious about that. You need to maybe get your kids into the German school, to American school, maybe a private school, which costs money. So the cost of living is still very high over here. And this has not changed. What also hasn't changed is all the employee salaries. Over here is much higher than in Europe and elsewhere in the world. Also the loyalty a little bit harder because people tend to switch jobs quite quickly because when they believe there's something else going on. Then when it comes to what is actually new, and when we think about it, and the Silicon Valley in general, that the rounds were always larger in general compared to Germany and the rest of Europe. However, also we see within the rounds a clear development that seed rounds went from 2 to 3 million, maybe to 5 to 7 millions now, and the A rounds can be 15. 1.5 up to $15 million, which are super high. But in general, it's still also the same that, in the US, I think the terms are more founder friendly when you want to compare it. But you have to get to those investors. And what has changed, of course, during COVID, because you have less events where you can start meeting investors when you don't have a network, it's hard to meet them now. But on the flip side, which is now on the positive side, is that actually you'll be able to meet them in maybe via video for the first meeting, which was not that possible before, and you can really start developing a relationship. But when it comes to the optimal setup for you as a startup going forward, how should you set it up if you want to be here, right? If you want to really hire the best employees also who know how to scale, and you want to get investors with access to really good networks. I still believe what is also still the same, and I think it's going to be like that for a while, that the core leadership team, if you decide to become a global company, should be in the US at least, and better if some of the people are here in Silicon Valley, you have a close relationship to the investors, but you can have the development elsewhere, and you can have, we are distributed these days also as a team here at my current company, where you can produce in a much lower cost.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Gunther Hoffmann, Managing Director of Corporate Finance Associates, an international investment bank. He helps owners and investors sell their company and raise capital. He is also chairman of EuroCham, an umbrella organization of bilateral trade organizations of European countries and the US, and the co-chair for venture capital and entrepreneurship at the German-American Business Association. Long introduction, but quick question. Why should companies come to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for having us, and hello to everybody. So why come to Silicon Valley in the first place, right? I've been here over 20 years, so the obvious answer is the weather is great, but there's 4 other reasons to come here. One, better access to funding, and that still holds true. There's just more money sloshing around here in the US and in Silicon Valley. Number 2, better customer access. In general, US companies are much more open to working with startups than German companies or European companies. 3, better partnering opportunities. And that can be more access to partnerships, technology partnerships, distribution partnerships, strategic partnerships. There's just more openness to that, but business moves faster. And 4th reason, and that's where we're working in, better exit opportunities. There's higher valuations for US companies, that's still true. And there's just more technology buyers here in the US. What does it mean to come to Silicon Valley? And this is really building on what Katrin said. For funding or fundraising, US investors in general still want to invest in a US company. So you need to have a holding company structure in the US. That's changing, but it's changing slowly. And that's kind of what Ekaterina was talking about, that US investors now invest in Europe, but the majority, they don't. They want to invest in a US company. For everything else, make it look like you're a US company or you have a US presence, but make sure you can deliver and you understand the culture. So subsidiary or an office, an address, a US phone number, but somebody in the same time zone that can discuss partnerships and that understands the Silicon Valley culture. If you have any questions, I'm happy to connect. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm based here in Silicon Valley, but our firm also has offices in Europe and in Germany. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. And just so everybody here knows, the German-American Business Association of California hosts monthly events, virtual events as well on venture capital and entrepreneurship. Register here for their virtual Meet a VC workshop. So I'm going to share the link to that now. And yeah, people are welcome to go along to that. So guys, next up we have Kati Schmidt, Director of Growth and Campus Operations at Course Hero, an online learning platform with over 60 million course-specific study resources contributed by their community of students, educators, and educational content specialists. Kati previously worked 6 years in Airbnb, where she saw the company grow from less than 100 employees to more than 5,000 employees, and from 100,000 guests to over 200 million guests. So that was quite a journey. And our question for you is, what is the biggest difference in doing business in the USA compared to Germany?
Hi, everybody. I also brought you a list of 5 things. Some of these things have been mentioned by the previous speakers, so I guess they must be true. And I repeat them anyway so that they stick. So if you want to do business in the US or enter the US market, there are 5 things to keep in mind. One is think big. I think if there's one really positive thing we've learned or can take away from the global pandemic, is that everything is like really, really connected. So there's no need to just start in the German market first or just worry about German customers first. Think big from the get-go. Secondly, radical optimism. Something that I'm still learning after so many years here in San Francisco, reminding myself to be positive, to embrace it, and maybe then adding the critical thinking that is very typical for Europe or for Germans as a second step. Third, and we've heard that from previous speakers as well, is storytelling. I also think that children here learn storytelling in kindergarten, in school, in college. Is one of the most important gifts that Americans have. You have to tell a story about your company and as well about yourself. So what's your story? Fourth, pay forward. So that's something that I've taken very personally and to heart from attending Burning Man a few years ago, but really pay forward. Don't ask what's in it for me. Don't do this typical, sometimes I would say German mentality, like tit for tat, like why, what's in it for me, like really pay forward. And I think karma and the network will deliver it back to you. And then lastly, I think it's also very stereotypical, but there's some truth in it. The Silicon Valley mantra of failing fast and failing often. This is just around iteration and getting back on your feet after something didn't work out at first. Failing here is really considered as learning. So don't worry too much about optimizing your CV or your story. Like if you're really good at storytelling, you can always pivot your story later. So those are the 5 things that I brought for you today.
Kadi, thank you so much. Next up, we have Jens, managing partner of Yabusame Partners. He has been based in Silicon Valley for 20 years. Jens works with B2B technology startups on developing and executing GTM strategies, launch and scale. He frequently assists startups from Europe and Asia with their international expansion into Silicon Valley and the US markets. And along with our previous speaker, Gunther, he's also a co-chair for venture capital and entrepreneurship at the German American Business Association. And we have a new question for you. What does it take for a German startup to successfully land in Silicon Valley?
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the session. I'm happy to give you a few pointers. Some of this has already been pointed out by my previous speakers, but for amplification, I will go into them again. The first thing I tell startups is if you are coming here to say, you know, I'll go to Silicon Valley, I'll raise money, and then I'll build my business, you're on the wrong track. You have to basically come essentially pre-financed, pre-funded for at least 6 to 12 months, because most investors will want to see US market validation and product market fit from your product here in the US, i.e. you have to have US customers, partners, at least the way to generate revenue. So that is absolutely key. The next thing is you have to build your US focused go-to-market strategy. Do not just apply your German footprint, your German blueprint of how you went to market and say, well, we're going to take this to the US. We were successful in Germany. We can do this in the US. It is very different. The business culture is very different. Companies are more prone to actually trying out new technologies. So they're much more able to basically go into POCs with you. The sales process is a different one. So make sure you understand how this works before you come here, and you come with a go-to-market plan in hand. The way to do this, I think, is you contract a knowledgeable local resource, and possibly for less than full time, that understands the market, that has knowledge of your product and has a relevant network. Because I see so many cases where companies, from afar, from Germany, basically remotely hire a VP of sales and then just hope for the best. It doesn't work that way. You need to have a fully briefed and immersed person that knows the market in the US, but also knows your product. You need to have that integration. And a hire is often a full-time commitment where you don't even know whether that person is going to be able to deliver. So local resource on contract, start with less than full-time is usually a good idea. Being in Silicon Valley and having access to this local network will also allow you to basically establish investor relationships that you will want to leverage later for fundraising. But it's good, as some people have pointed out, to know these people beforehand, to allow them to track your progress, and to then be in a relationship when you're ready to seriously pitch and start your fundraising. If you are seriously interested in entering the US market, after you've done your initial market discovery and due diligence, it's the right thing to set up a legal entity. We've heard this before. Very important. It makes business development, sales easier. US companies like to contract with a legal US entity, but it also helps very significantly with the fundraising. I would say, if you're interested in learning more about this, I'm actually happy to have a conversation. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I will actually also be in Germany next week So maybe there are opportunities to chat. Lastly, I want to repeat and amplify what speakers before me have said. First of all, have large, audacious goals. Stretch yourself. Be ambitious and optimistic and real and radically optimistic, as somebody said. It's the mentality here. Do not come across as modest, humble in a way of your goals. Otherwise, people will say, well, this is not fundable, or at least it's not interesting enough to fund, because you need to have big goals. Second of all, I think the storytelling aspect is very, very important. Make sure you know how to pitch your story. Rehearse it, try it out with different people, but make sure you come across as enthusiastic and as a good storyteller. And this will go a long way to allowing you to create customer relationships and good investor relationships. That's all my 2 cents for today.
Great, thank you so much. Our next speaker in this section, Stefan, is founder and owner of Klaschka & Co. He is a digital transformation executive and strategy consultant who builds, turns around, and manages businesses. And our question is, in your experience, what are common pitfalls or advice for German startups new to the USA?
Well, thanks for having me to start off with. A lot of good ideas have been floated here by previous speakers, so I will focus a little bit on cultural awareness and tactical and strategical advice in 4 points. One is, as we just heard, be prepared, but it's not just to have a polished elevator pitch and be able to present yourself. It's also come with a clear ask. What is it that you need? Think that through to the point, so you have exactly a clear idea on asking what you need from whoever you're talking to. Secondly, follow up quickly. I've had a case where some startup received a business card at a conference and then thought of following up 2 weeks later. That's too late. That doesn't work in the US. Be quick. So work your network, work it hard. The difference between East Coast and West Coast, perhaps, if you had some experiences in, let's say, New York, or from my experience, is quicker, clearer, don't waste time. It's the New York minute. You can talk to anyone, but don't waste their time. You will get a very quick answer of a no. And that doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means they don't want to talk about it at this point. No hard feelings. You can come back later if your idea gets better. West Coast, don't expect a clear no. That's my experience, at least. You might waste your time with people who hold on and lead you on, but they will not say no because it seems impolite. Perhaps some other speakers have some ideas to that from the Silicon Valley area. And then finally, use accelerators, use all the help you can get, of course, but depending on the potential of your offering, don't give away too much equity up front. Don't sell out to VCs or big companies too early. And as we just heard from the last speaker, be prepared for your key people to spend a lot of time overseas, away from their family, away from their friends. It's not always easy. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Really, really good advice again. Our final speaker in this section will be Liliana, CEO of Treo Biome Incorporated, an angel investor at Band of Angels. She is a serial entrepreneur, scientist, and investor in high-tech and biotech companies with a demonstrated history of co-founding and growing several companies with successful exits. And our question for you, given your experience in angel investing, what tips do you have for German startups and scale-ups getting funding in the USA in 2021?
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. First of all, I must say that the chances for German startups to get funded by angel investors in the US are pretty good in 2021 and looking forward. Before COVID, angel groups here in Silicon Valley had less interest in investing in a startup that wasn't local, but we all had to learn how to do business with Zoom, making geography much less of a criterion for angels to select startups for funding. So most angel investors here are now very open to investing in foreign startups if it makes business sense, meaning that your customers, partners, competitors, and exit opportunities are primarily in the US. If they are, the angel groups I'm working with will require that the German startup sets up a corporation in the US and operates in a dual entity structure. The common approach here is incubating the business locally in Germany with a small business development team to prove early market and product fit and get early market traction. And then while maintaining research and development in Germany, which is much often less costly than in the US, you then build a sales and marketing organization in the US. For that, the founder CEO needs to be prepared to move to the US to build the satellite office and personally oversee American executives recruitment management who can lead the sales and marketing efforts. One other tip of advice I want to give, building on what Katrin was saying, is to find a reputable sponsor and mentor with an excellent track record here in the US. So angel groups and VCs are much more likely to invest in firms recommended by people they know and trust. And it's therefore very essential to network here in the US to gain a referral, or even better, a lead investor who will sponsor you into their investor network. Being accepted by an accelerator program like Techstars or Y Combinator also gives foreign companies a stamp of approval, which is often enough to attract top-tier investors. These are my tips for German startups seeking investments through angel investors in the US, particularly in Silicon Valley. Thank you, Adam, for hosting such a great event.
Liliana, and thank you for doing such a great speech. Thank you. Next up, we have a 10-minute fireside chat with Julian, who leads the talent acquisition team for the product and analytics departments at Personio. So Julian, welcome. Before we begin, can you tell me a bit about what Personio is?
Yeah, sure. Basically, Personio, and hi everyone, is a people operating system for customers from the startup stage up to SMEs, so small and medium enterprises. Basically, we offer a holistic kind of set of tools or tool managing all HR processes just in a single place. So we're digitizing the HR work of our customers. With now our Series E and investing heavily into the people workflow automation that you might have also seen in the Silicon Valley arise, we basically enable HR to go beyond HR by transforming manual people process to automated workflows.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Now, I am hiring my first employee next month. Who should that first person be?
Yeah, that's a very tricky question, I guess. And it also depends a bit on like the founders, the group of founders, or if you're a single founder. But basically, I think it's super important to look for people with a similar mindset and values that you have, but with opposing strengths. So ideally, you really find someone who loves to do what you hate to do. So you really have to think about what kind of competencies do I have and bring people in with really opposing strengths. And I think those first, but also like not the first only, but the very first hires you make into a company are really, really important for the direction you want to develop in as a company. Just as an example, at Personio, I think our employee number 7 is still with us in the company as Chief Operating Officer, but also 3 of our 4 founders are still operational in their role in the C-level at Personio these times.
Great, and Steve Jobs is always mentioned in startup conferences. I recently saw a video where he said, hire a great core group of 10 people at the beginning. How important do you think it is to hire from the very beginning?
I think it's super important because on the one side, as a founder, you don't want to get burned out. Obviously, founding a company means long working hours, but bringing in the right group of people also sets you up for success from the beginning. And like I said, again, like those first hires you actually bring into your company really shapes also the direction you want to bring the company in. So I think the first hires you do, you really need to think very, very specific about what those people are, but it's also important to look in the future already and think about like, okay, what is actually the vision of those people? What kind of people do they want to bring in? I think also, I know it was Steve Jobs, but it's very common from the founders from there to hear about don't hire B-level B people, hire C people, but really you need to bring in top people from the very beginning that really share your vision and ideas.
Yeah, very interesting. And how do I, this isn't like rhetorical, this is actual advice that I need. How do I go looking for an employee? LinkedIn, a job board? What do you recommend?
Yeah, very good question. I think this also depends a bit on kind of the market you're in. I don't know, like Personio is one of those companies still very European headquartered, well backed by Silicon Valley investors, and also our offices are here. I think here it's a lot about your personal network. So try to activate the connections you have and try to post the jobs on the kind of specific job spot that you want to have. But I actually don't think you need to pay a lot of money in the beginning for that, because it's also important to maybe do your active sourcing yourself from the very beginning, identify people you might want to work with, go into alumni groups of certain startup networks and directly approach those people. I think that's how you do it in the beginning. Our COO, he came helping his brother bring furniture into the first office we had here. So there's also like very unforeseen circumstances that can happen. But generally, if you want to be like strategic about this, I think it's about activating your own network, but also looking actively for the right people that you want to bring in.
Cool. And another question I have, Personio was founded in 2015, according to your LinkedIn page, and you already have 1,000 employees. So in only 5 or 6 years, how did you handle that hyper growth, doubling or tripling your employees every year?
Yeah, I think there's many aspects of how we handle that. So the growth, especially in the last 3 years or so, has been tremendous. So we've been less than 200 people just 3 years ago, and now we're over 1,000. So the growth at the actual scale really happened only in the beginning of 2018. And I think there's so many things to consider. It's around like the kind of culture. So it's important to phrase, but I think this is important with the first employee, to phrase like your own people value proposition. So who do you want to be as an employee? For CEOs, it's important. Who do you want to be as a CEO? But when it comes to the real hyper growth, our own talent acquisition department is massively changing every year, basically. So we've really come away from like a very kind of holistic, versatile recruiting approach towards a very, very specialized approach, being kind of customer-centric and really building up teams for the departments and for the functions that we have here at Personio. Otherwise, we could never handle the scale of bringing in 1,000 people within just 1 year, which is the ambition for 2022.
Great, and I have more questions, but I think first we can look at the poll perhaps. Does it surprise you that so many startups, most of the startups here have below 20 employees, I think. Most of them use in-house recruitment rather than an agency?
Now, that's actually great to see. I think working with agencies brings a lot of value to the company, because you sometimes need to invest heavily at a certain point of time. And you also have to be considerative about growing like your HR or your recruiting capabilities, because everyone needs to be kept busy. You really need to grow in a healthy size there. So recruitment agencies can add a lot of value. But I also think it's good to see that a lot of those things are happening in-house, because you're not only investing in the now, but you're also like with the right tools and processes in place, you're actually building up a strong pipeline of future talent and a strong database of future talent. So every kind of candidate connection that an agency is having for you, you basically lose yourself in terms of networking and in terms of future hiring capabilities. So I think it's important to have a good mix, and it's definitely super valuable to work with agencies. But also I think it's really good to see in this round here that many people actually do those efforts in-house and create like the long-term value with that and the long-term candidate relations.
Yeah, and what's the hardest role to find the right person for? Sales comes up first. Normally it's engineering, or they're both very close to each other.
Yeah, that's actually interesting to see. I think at the moment it's such a candidate-driven market. Everyone is hard to hire. Like it's a really, really candidate-driven market. There's less great people out there than there's open roles. We also have very hard times hiring into HR, and that's why we also always try to make those processes here a lot more efficient. But it's not a huge surprise, because also in sales you need to be more and more knowledgeable around your target audience, around the software or the general product that you're selling. So it gets more and more specific, and the more specific roles get, I think the harder they are to fill. But I'm also surprised that engineering did not hit number one in that poll, to be honest.
Yeah, and the results of another poll, should companies post salaries in job adverts? Now, most people say yes. I'm not sure of the arguments for. What's your personal opinion of that? Because maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, that's a very old debate. honestly, we don't do it out of several reasons. Like, I think we pay very, very competitive salaries on the market. And in the end, you don't want to get people just be interested in your company for monetary reasons, because sometimes, and data shows that the people coming from monetary reasons also are keen to leave soon as well. But I also understand the candidate-driven market, that people don't want to invest a lot of time for roles or jobs that might not in the end like meet their expectations from a salary perspective. I think here it's also rather important to be as transparent as you can, make this part of a people value proposition, to be transparent towards candidates, and don't make this a surprise at the end on offer stage. I think if you are like a startup or a growing up company, it's also super, super valuable to work with equity programs. Like, we have an ESOP program giving a part of the company to all of our employees, which is hard to phrase on a job description. So there's a lot more benefits and also from the compensation point of view than just the base salary. But I understand why candidates are really keen to know that before applying for a role. I think it's a never-ending debate, to be honest.
Great. No, I really, really appreciate it. So just to give a summary of our last two polls, most of you have said that you are more efficient, your startups, when you are remote working, which is very interesting. And you have said after the COVID pandemic, if the COVID pandemic ends, let's see, we are returning to normality, you will mostly work remotely, which is very interesting. So it's really, really a long-term thing. But of course, there are benefits and challenges to this. And I'll just share these results in a moment. I know certainly employee isolation, that's a very important thing so far. Lack of relationships among co-workers. And I have seen in my personal experience, it's easier for employees to leave a company if they haven't met people face to face. So very interesting. I'm going to just share those results now after 1 minute. And we got exactly 100 people. I like that. So there you go. The biggest benefit of remote working, increased productivity, very interesting, reduced costs as well. And as I mentioned, employee isolation and lack of relationships among co-workers. I will post this poll data after the event, don't worry. So Julian, thank you for that. And then we have our final speaker, and this will be a very interesting topic, actually, very different to what we've just done. So Gary, you are a blockchain investor who founded VAI, a digital supply chain lender which enables businesses to buy goods globally on its own terms by providing a revolving payment plan for up to 180 days. Gary sold VAI to Berlin Volksbank EG, and he was once named in Forbes 30 under 30 for finance. And your presentation is about how decentralized finance, DeFi, on the blockchain is changing the world of finance. And folks, before Gary gives his presentation, I can actually tell you that you can ask questions in the Q&A. Gary will speak for 5 minutes, and then he will answer your Q&A about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me. Today, I'm going to tell you guys a bit more about DeFi and why it's changing the world right now. So DeFi, which is also known as decentralized finance, is changing the world by basically replacing the foundations of the centralized financial system that we currently live in with a completely decentralized infrastructure. The promise of DeFi is to build an open financial system that is set to democratize the global economy. In essence, DeFi is based on programmable and composable money, also known as money Legos, that can work because transactions are managed by smart contracts, which allow for a high degree of automation. This eliminates the requirements essentially for intermediaries, making DeFi highly efficient. DeFi is composable also because the entire system is open source and thus compatible with limitless combinations of ever-evolving protocols that can be assembled and built upon. DeFi can offer basically all the same products that every one of you knows and services that are open in the traditional or can be found in the traditional financial space, whilst leveraging the strengths of decentralized infrastructure. As a result, traditional financial products and services are getting radically improved. And furthermore, due to the openness of DeFi and interoperability of DeFi protocols, innovation in the space is progressing rapidly while traditional finance remains stagnant. Also, DeFi offers advancements in international payment systems. That's something I've been doing a lot in my FinTech 2.0 career after working in banking. So obviously DeFi advances the blockchain and supersedes the SWIFT protocol, right? Blockchains such as Polygon, I'm closely working with based on the new DeFi protocol that I'm involved with named Getquinn, is way more secure, far cheaper and far quicker and by the way, has also significantly lower carbon footprint than anything traditional finance can offer. Also, one of the main advantages of DeFi is that it's borderless. Anywhere, anyone, anywhere with a smartphone access to the internet can use those financial services. All of a sudden, they can securely store value using security tokens. They can also invest anywhere in the world in anything with a click of a button. And that's one of the key things, the tokenization of assets. It's the process of changing value, i.e. the asset, into its digital representative. And once that value is available on distributed ledger technology, aka the blockchain, it can be traded, borrowed against, sold, invested in, etc., by anyone that has access to the DeFi application, i.e. anyone with a smartphone. This will revolutionize also asset trading across the globe, offering traders new markets, new opportunities, and it will increase competitiveness, transparency, liquidity, and accessibility across the world. Public blockchains also are censorship resistant and allow for a high degree of transparency and trust. This is because all transactions are essentially immutable, transparent, and peer-to-peer or peer-to-contract. So they don't require a trusted intermediary, such as a bank, a broker, or any other financial services intermediary. DeFi, it means that there's a high degree of accountability as communities monitor essentially the actions of the developers behind the platform via the blockchain or open ledger transaction histories. dApps, which are decentralized applications and protocols used in DeFi, are all open source. This means anyone can view and share the code, right? Think about that. If you would really know what's happening inside your bank, right? That's unimaginable for that they share everything with their customer base. So those dApps, the decentralized apps, they communicate on open borderless networks that anyone can access, just like the internet. This makes DeFi essentially permissionless and highly inclusive, as people can participate in DeFi without fear of discrimination or denial based on their financial history. To access DeFi protocols such as Aave, which is basically a DeFi bank with over $30 billion on their balance sheet by now, all you need is an internet connection and some funds. Having said that, early stage users are required to learn many technical elements, and the project I'm involved with now is basically going to change that and hopefully bring the next million users to the space. So yeah, to conclude, DeFi is equipped to fundamentally changing the world. The growth is something that you won't see in any other space in tech right now. It's mind-blowing. In comparison to traditional finance, DeFi facilitates real radical improvements in terms of privacy, trust, transparency, and security. DeFi will enable the unbanked to join the economic system. It will lower the cost of doing business and will offer new investment opportunities for anyone across the globe. Thank you very much. Yeah, and we'd love to answer some questions on the chat.
We already have one question. Could you discuss Polygon versus Binance Smart Chain, please?
Sure. So Binance Smart Chain is a blockchain that was developed together with a financial centralized broker that essentially offers people to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other financial assets called Binance. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, trading platform brokerage for cryptocurrencies in the world. There've been a lot in the news lately, and they have their own blockchain. The problem is Binance essentially is a centralized company. There is a CEO, and they have to work under different government legislations all over the world, whereas Polygon is a truly decentralized blockchain. They do have connections with other blockchains, such as Binance blockchain, but in its essence, both are extremely fast, faster than the Ethereum blockchain or even the Bitcoin blockchain. They're much cheaper, so the transactions take way less cost, and the carbon footprint, in particular at Polygon, is way lower than most other of those big blockchains. So it's really something that is scalable and also sustainable. And if you heard about NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens that many artists now produce on the blockchain, so something like Polygon is really made for mass usage. And that's why, for instance, the company I'm involved with is now building on Polygon.
Can you please name the DeFi platform on Polygon that you mentioned?
Maybe you mentioned, or the two companies I mentioned are gogocoin.io, which essentially is an on-chain asset manager to bring the next big wave of users to the blockchain, in particular Polygon. And the other one I mentioned was Aave, which is Finnish for ghost. And what it means, it's really a decentralized bank where you can deposit funds on the left side and borrow against that on the right side of your screen, completely permissionless, completely trustless. You just need a crypto wallet with some Ethereum or Polygon tokens or any other tokens, and you're good to go. You don't have to ask a bank if they offer you a loan. You don't have to interact with a bank manager. It's really, truly mind-blowing. So I urge anyone to Google a bit about DeFi banking, especially people with banking financial backgrounds. They're really mind-blowing, come with big waves into that space. So in the future, we're not going to call decentralized finance. We're just going to call it finance, because it will completely replace the existing banking network. And that's why, the regulators, politicians, and the tech media is now slowly but surely shifting their attention to that, because they see there is a huge wave of innovation incoming.
Great, thank you, Gary. And are there any good examples of DeFi in the logistics industry, and what could be suitable applications for the future?
In logistics, so you can usually obviously use the distributed ledger technology, i.e. the blockchain, for logistics. DeFi is basically a part of the blockchain technology, right? It doesn't cover everything. So DeFi is particularly the type of technology that interacts with financial services or disrupts financial services or any derivatives of that. So with logistics, I don't have a straight example in my mind where you have DeFi, logistics, and the blockchain combined, but yeah, sure. Anything where you have to pay for goods, and tangible goods, that is, you can use DeFi, so basically token or securitize a financial asset and then tokenize it on the blockchain, making the whole process much easier. You don't need notaries anymore. You don't need hundreds of pages of paperwork. It makes it way more efficient, way more cheaper, and you can execute essentially deals, but also the exchange of goods or tangible assets in a much more leaner, faster way. So there will be way more applications, I'm sure, also for logistics coming soon. There's one project called Centrifuge based in Berlin, Germany, that is tokenizing financial cash flows. So cash flows of, let's say, a supply chain financing company, and they bring it on the blockchain, and they just, I think, secured like $500 million.
Great, and we have so many questions. We just have 5 minutes left, by the way, guys. But how do you see the digital euro, European Central Bank, interacting with public blockchain like Polygon in the future?
Sure. So that's obviously one of the key concerns of every centralized financial entity, in particular the central banks, because essentially you have a shadow banking system being created as we speak. There are two ways. Either you try to undermine it, almost try to get rid of it by over-regulating it, but we're a bit too late for that. So what most central banks are now doing is to find a way how they compete with that. So that's why they start building centralized currencies, their own currencies. So some of you probably heard about the digital euro or the digital dollar, and some other central banks are actually way more advanced with that. So as far as I know, in China, they already have one in place. Essentially, it uses distributed ledger technology and the blockchain to create a new form of the local currency, but it's completely centralized, meaning the whole idea of the blockchain being free and anonymous and dynamic and transparent is not really embedded into those kind of currencies. So the crypto community is not really taking that seriously, and they're the guys driving the innovation. So I think the central banks will have a hard time to implement that, but like they usually do, they will try to enforce it. They will try to make sure that's the only currency, the main currency that you're going to use. So it's going to be an interesting I would say, discussion, to not use any brutal words, because yeah, we're essentially in the war, in the silent war of who's actually gonna be driving in the financial innovation in the next decades. And currently, the central banks are, a bit slow, but they're gonna pick up. I'm sure they have task forces looking into that as we speak. So it's gonna be a very, very interesting discussion. Polygon is one of the few big blockchains that will be used for that, because it's reliable, it's safe, it's transparent, and it's ready for mass transactions and adoption. So I think Polygon will be highly used for that as well.
Great, thank you. And I think we can end with one question. How will DeFi become more sustainable for the planet in terms of energy consumption?
So DeFi requires way less energy than the current traditional financial system. That might come to a surprise to many, but we use a lot of energy to run our current payment network throughout the world, or our exchanges, our financial assets. I don't know the numbers. It's a bit, it's available online. It's way more sustainable in terms of carbon footprinting. Polygon or other blockchains that are known as side chains or layer 2 chains, meaning they're developments or advancements of existing blockchains such as Ethereum, Bitcoin, require way less carbon footprint than blockchain and Ethereum. So this is the future. You essentially have blockchains that are being developed to be more faster than the old blockchains, but also be more efficient in terms of energy consumption. So one day, sending money throughout the world will be basically carbon neutral, and currently it's definitely not. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
All right, thank you so much, Gary. Great presentation.